On the 3rd of May 2007, the McCann family were on holiday in Praia da Luz, Portugal, when the parents' worst nightmare unfolded. Their 3-year-old daughter, Madeleine, disappeared from their apartment while they were dining at a nearby restaurant. Before we get into this case, I just want to stress that this is about a real child, a real family, and a case that people do feel emotionally attached to. We're going to be looking at the impact this case has made on the world. It's just going to be heavy stuff, so just letting you know before we get into this. But with that being said, let's get into the case of the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. What was meant to be a week-long holiday, Kate and Gerry McCann, along with Madeleine and her twin siblings, were holidaying in Praia da Luz and enjoying the Mediterranean sun. On the evening of the 6th day of the holiday, Kate and Gerry put their children to bed at 8:30 and walked over to the resort's tapas restaurant to dine with their friends. Throughout the night, the parents would check on the children every 30 minutes or so, and when it was Kate's turn to check at 10 o'clock, she discovered that Madeleine was missing from her bed. What followed that evening can only be described as utter chaos, as the parents desperately scrambled to find their missing daughter. And over the next few weeks, the case became a media circus, capitalising on the fact that a white girl had gone missing abroad and the sensational aspect of her age for the media to tap into parental fears. The success of the story meant that the media coverage on the case turned into a 24/7 ordeal, with every single news outlet providing the public with frequent updates about the investigation. It was on a scale not seen since Princess Diana's death, and the whole world knew the face of Madeleine McCann. It wasn't long until this coverage turned sour though, with news outlets not only criticising the parents for leaving their children unsupervised, but publishing wild theories about how they either killed their daughter by accident or on purpose, or sold her off. The influence of these types of stories meant that by September of that year, a Sunday Times poll showed that only 20% of the public believed the couple were innocent. The intense tabloid coverage highlighted the issue of having a balance between public interest and the privacy for the family and the investigators to do their job. What arguably makes this case so infamous is the fact that a suspect was never actually charged with the kidnapping of Madeleine. Although there were numerous leads being considered, no one could actually be formally charged due to the lack of evidence. Interestingly though, there was quite a bit of evidence pointing towards the parents as suspects, including sniffer dogs picking up on the smell of a corpse in the apartment they were staying in, and in the car that the McCanns rented 24 days after Madeleine went missing. However, on the night of Madeleine's disappearance, there was a male spotted carrying a child in their pyjamas away from the apartment, and a composite sketch was drawn based on what the witness saw. It's honestly swings and roundabouts with this case. I don't know. It's such a weird one, right? So there is actually a primary suspect called Christian Breukner, who is a convicted offender, but there isn't enough sufficient evidence to name him to bring formal charges, and he also denies any involvement in Madeleine's disappearance. But I mean, anyone would, right? Even if you were involved, unless you wanted to go to prison, obviously. And then you have the conflicting processes between different countries. Based on their prime suspect, German prosecutors are convinced Madeleine is dead and claim they have strong evidence for this, but just not enough for an indictment. UK Metropolitan Police, though, continue to treat the case as a missing person inquiry, and they're painting hope that Madeleine is still alive. The Portuguese police, as we know, initially named the parents as formal suspects, or arguidos, believing that they did accidentally kill their daughter and had to dispose of the evidence. And this suspicion dropped a year later, but did create tensions between the Portuguese and the UK police. In fact, all of these differing views on the case has created a jurisdictional conflict in which one solid theory cannot be agreed on, and so this, along with the renewed investigations, keeps the mystery of the case alive, or you could say, keep the wounds open. And I think an unresolved case, especially in the internet age, just only becomes more enticing with all of these keyboard investigators. What do you call them? You know what I mean, like just people trying to figure out who did this. And this is where we move on to the reason why people still need answers to this case. The nature of the disappearance would obviously demand attention from the public, who seem to see Madeleine as part of their own family, creating a collective feeling of tragedy and distress. To see an innocent toddler, like a toddler, being targeted and taken is one of the most immoral things we can witness as human beings, and people's projections of what actually happened to her would inevitably follow as a result, and so the armchair detectives did get involved. Those are the words I was looking for earlier. So these people would actually create websites to discuss theories of what happened, analyse the discrepancies in police files, and interact with official figures involved in the case. And the dark side of this saw an onslaught of harassment towards Jerry and Kate, accusing them of killing their daughter. And though I absolutely don't condone harassment, this type of behaviour showed just how devastated the public were about Madeleine, and a need to place the blame on someone when presented with no other clear suspects. As a case that unfolded when I was 11 years old, I remember the outrage that spread across the nation and across the entire world when Madeleine's disappearance was first reported. I think especially as someone who lives in the UK, this case represents every parent's worst nightmare when going abroad to have a relaxing holiday with their family. It's something you could only imagine happening to you in nightmares, and I think this naturally created the need for answers and for justice, right? It's sad that when people are so affected by a case, it can actually turn people against each other and cause them to blame other people who aren't necessarily at fault. As members of the public, it is our responsibility to demand continued investigations, obviously, to find missing persons and obtain justice for those people and bring that person back home if possible. But we also have a duty to support the families who are directly affected by what happened and not point fingers when there isn't enough evidence to do so. It is so often forgotten, but the quote, "innocent until proven guilty," is paramount in cases like this. A great way to actually support the families and remember and acknowledge the missing is by organising memorials and community events, right? This way they aren't just forgotten, and hopefully it serves to ensure that investigations aren't just closed, meaning that one day potentially, no matter how bleak it may seem, there is a possibility of finding that person, and bringing the guilty to justice would just be a bonus, or the cherry on top, if you will. Some people do argue that some cases should just be left to rest, but I would personally like to believe that if anything happened to myself or someone that I love, people just wouldn't give up on them and the case is closed straight away. In all honesty, and I think it's a sentiment that a lot of people share with me, this case may not ever be solved, right? And that uncomfortable truth is hard to swallow, and when things like this happen, it only confirms my belief that things don't happen for a reason, or if they do, that I'm not equipped to understand why. The workings of the universe in this sense just don't make sense to me. But as I said, by making sure that Madeleine is never forgotten, we are acknowledging that some cases can't give us the closure we need, and that we do have a responsibility to remember with care. And that is it for the case of Madeleine McCann, guys. If you'd like to share your views on this one, please do comment down below. And as always, let's keep them respectful and thoughtful. If you are interested in true crime, mysteries, the paranormal, please be sure to subscribe for more. And I will see you guys next time.